Imagine a packed auditorium filled with ideological tensions, where a young communist faces Donald Trump with a sharp question that silences the room. What seemed like just another lecture on economics and individual freedom turns into a fascinating confrontation between completely opposing worldviews. But what no one expected was the ending of this story. A conclusion so unexpected and emotional that it left everyone speechless. Before diving into this surprising story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content like this, bringing emotion and reflection to every detail. Boston woke up to an electric atmosphere, as if the city knew something significant was about to unfold. That day, one of the most anticipated events brought together a diverse audience in a packed auditorium, eyes shining with expectation. Donald Trump, ever the polarizing figure, was about to take the stage to speak about economics and individual freedom. The room buzzed with a mix of admiration and skepticism, supporters holding signs high and critics whispering among themselves. Among these distinct voices were those who came simply to listen and reflect. What no one anticipated was that the debate that would define the day wouldn't originate from the stage, but from the audience itself. The lecture began with the energetic tone expected from Trump, filled with impactful phrases and arguments. Brimming with conviction, he touched on sensitive topics like inequality, prosperity, and the promises of a strong capitalist system. Yet, amid the speech, there was a palpable tension in the air, an uneasy silence that hinted something unexpected was about to happen, and then it did. When the Q&A session was announced, the intensity in the auditorium rose, like the temperature on a sweltering summer day. Among the many raised hands, one stood out. A young man, barely in his 20s, with piercing eyes and an expression that blended determination with defiance. As he stood, he introduced himself as a communist, and in a voice sharp as a blade, posed his question: how can you defend capitalism, knowing it creates inequality and crushes the poor while enriching the wealthy? For a moment, silence engulfed the room. It was as though the entire audience held its breath, waiting for Trump's response. As Trump adjusted his microphone, the room seemed frozen in time. Some exchanged anxious glances, while others shifted uneasily in their seats. Yet Trump appeared unfazed. On the contrary, he smiled, as someone who had faced similar scenarios countless times, and began his response with the calm confidence of a seasoned speaker. But before he could finish, it became clear that the young man wasn't there just to listen. He was ready to push back. And so, what started as a simple Q&A session morphed into something far greater. The initial provocation was merely the opening act in what would become a battle of ideas, a clash of perspectives that no one in Boston would soon forget. The young man who stood up wasn't just another voice in the crowd. He exuded confidence. Not the arrogant kind, but the assurance of someone deeply rooted in his beliefs. The air in the auditorium grew heavy as he began to speak, each word laden with conviction and a hint of defiance. How can you defend capitalism, knowing it creates inequality and crushes the poor while enriching the wealthy? His question thundered through the room, drawing intrigued glances and murmurs from the audience. Everyone was left wondering how Trump would respond to such a direct challenge. Trump lifted his gaze toward the young man, seemingly assessing the opponent before him. He adjusted the microphone, paused briefly, and, to everyone's surprise, began his response with an almost disarming composure. Capitalism isn't perfect, but it's the system that gives you the opportunity to rewrite your story. It doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees the freedom to try. As his words echoed through the hall, scattered applause broke out, but the tension lingered. Trump wasn't just replying, he was crafting an argument. The young man, however, wasn't intimidated. He shook his head slightly as if expecting such an answer. Without hesitation, he countered with determination. And what about the millions who never get that opportunity? The marginalized, the invisible within the system you so ardently defend? The debate was just beginning, and each exchange of words seemed to fuel the growing intensity in the room. It was like watching a chess match where both players were determined to outwit each other. Trump, with his trademark rhetorical skill, decided to flip the narrative. Do you prefer a system where everyone is equally poor and no one has the right to question anything? His voice was firm yet composed, and the question hung in the air, sparking murmurs among the audience. But he didn't stop there. In an unexpected gesture, he invited the young man to the stage to continue the dialogue face to face. The silence that followed was so profound, it felt as though even the room itself was holding its breath. Trump's invitation was as surprising as it was disarming. All eyes turned to the young man, awaiting his reaction. Stepping onto the stage wasn't just about continuing the debate. It meant entering a space where every word would be amplified, every misstep magnified. But with the same determination he had shown earlier, the young man accepted. This was the beginning of a moment that promised to be as transformative as it was explosive. When the two stood face to face on stage, the contrast between them was striking. On one side, Trump, exuding his signature confidence and unwavering stage presence. On the other, the young man, whose visible nervousness was tempered by a controlled demeanor, as if he knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The audience sat in complete silence, captivated by the clash of generations, ideologies, and life experiences. The young man's microphone trembled slightly in his hand, but his words were steady. I grew up in a community where people fight to survive. How can you say capitalism works when so many still live in misery? Trump listened carefully, leaning forward slightly, as if acknowledging the gravity of the young man's statement. He adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began his response with a phrase loaded with intent. I admire your passion. The statement caught many off guard, but he quickly followed up. But passion without purpose is like a car without direction. Capitalism doesn't solve every problem, but it gives you the tools to build something better. The remark drew scattered applause, but the young man's eyes revealed his skepticism. The young man didn't back down. He dove deeper, citing Karl Marx, highlighting structural inequalities, and presenting seemingly irrefutable statistics. It was as though he was determined to prove he was prepared for this moment, yet Trump seemed more interested in listening than in countering right away. When the young man finally finished, Trump smiled and responded, You're right to point out flaws. No system is perfect, but I ask you, what would you do to improve the lives of the people around you? How would you channel this passion you have to create real impact? That question changed the tone of the exchange. The young man hesitated for a moment, clearly taken aback. It was no longer about criticizing, it was about proposing. The audience once again held its collective breath, eager to see how he would respond. Sensing the tension, Trump added, Criticism is easy, but building takes courage. Why not use this energy to find practical solutions? The statement, delivered with a near-paternal tone, resonated deeply in the room. At that moment, the dynamic between them shifted. The young man seemed to relax slightly, as if beginning to realize that this debate wasn't a battle to be won, but a conversation that could transform his perspective. The audience, previously divided between applause and silence, now seemed unified in a single thought. They were witnessing something extraordinary. On stage, the conversation took a turn no one could have anticipated. As the young man presented his arguments, it became clear that he wasn't there merely to attack. He wanted to be heard, to have his concerns taken seriously. He quoted Karl Marx with ease, articulating how the capitalist system perpetuates inequality and marginalizes communities. As he spoke, his voice, initially filled with defiance, began to reveal something deeper, a genuine concern for the most vulnerable. It was as if he were carrying the weight of a much larger cause. Trump remained composed, listening intently. He gestured lightly, encouraging the young man to continue. When it was finally Trump's turn to speak, he began with a statement no one expected. "You're right to be angry. Anger is what drives change." The remark caused a stir in the audience. It wasn't typical for Trump to acknowledge such sentiments, but he quickly shifted gears. The question is, how do you turn that anger into action? Because tearing down a system isn't the same as building a better one. The exchange between the two deepened. Trump shared examples of entrepreneurs who had started with nothing, individuals who, through innovation and hard work, transformed entire communities. He highlighted stories of progress, but without dismissing the challenges of the system he defended. "I'm not saying it's easy," he admitted, locking eyes with the young man. "But the beauty of capitalism lies in the possibility of doing something extraordinary, even when starting from adversity." The young man listened in silence, absorbing every word. For the first time, it seemed he was more interested in understanding than in countering. Trump, noticing the shift in the young man's expression, offered a final thought. "You're smart, you have ideas, and you have passion. Why not use that to create something that truly helps people? The world has enough. Critics, what we need are builders." The statement left the room in a profound silence, as though everyone was processing the weight of what had been said. In that moment, the exchange between them ceased to be just an ideological clash. It became something much greater, a conversation about possibilities, about finding solutions amidst differences. The audience, which had started the event divided between applause and criticism, now seemed united by a shared feeling, hope. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and no one wanted to miss what would happen next. As the conversation progressed, the atmosphere in the auditorium began to shift. The tension that had previously filled the air was replaced by something subtler, almost imperceptible: mutual respect. The young man, who initially seemed determined to challenge Trump at all costs, now bore a different expression, a mix of reflection and curiosity. Looking at Trump, he spoke with a calmer tone. "I've never thought about some of the things you've mentioned. Maybe I've focused more on the problems than on the solutions." The audience, which had been divided into supporters and critics, erupted into applause. It was as if that small admission symbolized something much larger: the power of dialogue between opposing viewpoints. Trump, ever attuned to the moment, extended his hand to the young man and said, "Admitting that is a big step. Now what will you do with this new perspective?" The gesture, simple yet deeply meaningful, moved many in the crowd. The young man, visibly touched, shook Trump's hand. It wasn't just a handshake, it was a symbol of something rarely seen in such heated debates: respect and openness to learning. He thanked Trump for the opportunity and added, "I still have much to believe in, but I learned something important today. Thank you for listening." The sincerity in his voice made it clear that this moment would stay with him forever. The two descended from the stage. The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. People who had been on opposite sides moments earlier were now clapping together as if they had witnessed something transformative. This was no longer just a political debate. It had become a powerful reminder of how dialogue can open doors, even between seemingly irreconcilable views. The young man walked off the stage with steady steps, but a different light in his eyes, as though he now carried not only his ideas, but also new possibilities. The final scene was powerful and emotional. Trump and the young man standing side by side, waving to the audience, showing that even in the greatest disagreements, it's possible to find common ground. What began as just another lecture ended as a symbol of how respect and conversation can turn even the most heated discussions into something incredibly inspiring. This story proves that even between opposing views, respect and dialogue can create transformative moments. The encounter between Trump and the young communist showed that more than debating who is right or wrong, it's essential to listen, reflect, and work toward building something greater. And you? Have you ever stopped to think about how your beliefs might evolve by listening to someone who thinks differently? If this story touched you or made you reflect, leave a comment and share your opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow more incredible stories like this one. See you in the next video.